nie działa, jak miałem pierwsza. Ten też teraz przeserował.
Mogę słyszeć, tak?
Test. 2, 2, 3, 3. Ale wchodzi gdzieś? 2, 1, ale nie widzę, że gdzieś wchodził. 2, 3. Test 1.
Sławek do nas dołączył, żeby na razie wyciszyć tam to jedno krzesło. No właśnie tak. Sławek. Dzień dobry, czy mnie słychać?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Zuzanna Krzątała. I am very happy that we're all of us here and that we can talk about the issue that is of key importance but was neglected for years: social resilience. When a crisis comes, a pandemic, a flood, a war, it is not the state that reacts first, it's the people, neighbors, volunteers, NGOs. Civic society in Poland has become an informal early response system, a network of cooperation, trust, and action. The question is how to channel this energy of spontaneous mobilization into something lasting in times of peace as well. In a world of disinformation, uncertainty, and tensions, it is the social capital, relationships, trust, joint responsibility. They become the new dimension of safety. That is why today we are going to talk about training resilience and building it from the bottom up. What habits we can learn so that community is permanence and not just something that happens in a crisis situation.
Pisarz i linia frontu od początku.
Writer and president of the Frontline organization involved in Help for Ukraine from the very beginning. Madam Katarzyna Szymielewicz, lawyer, president of Panoptykon Foundation. Mr. Maciej Kuziemski, president of PKO BP Foundation, which actively supported relief activities during last year's flood, and Sławomir Sierakowski, sociologist, commentator, the political criticism founder. Can we be a little bit louder? I can't hear myself. Can you hear us? Not too well. Could you please make us a little bit louder so that we do not have to fight for this civic society? Thank you. This is much better. So let us start with a question. What is social resilience? Because we talk about it a lot. So how do you understand it in context of today's challenges? Yes, I have a bit of a problem too. Can you hear me? Not so well? Well, I will ask you to pull up the sound a little bit so we have a gender balance, so to say. Can you hear me better now? Thank you very much. I apologize for rushing in the way I did. Social resilience is a very broad category and we are only learning it now. Just as we have learned during the pandemic, then we learned what the war is about and how it works. We keep learning that on the current. Resilience has all possible dimensions: social, military, economic, and so on. And Ukraine is winning this war on social resilience, or is not losing the war, because what we see in what gets in the media every day is drones, attacks, offensives, counteroffensives. But when we hear that critical infrastructure is under attack, then we do not hear how quickly it gets fixed or how prevention works, how much the Ukrainians have learned and how much social resistance there is. Without that, this war would have ended much faster, even much faster than without weapons. It was clear in Ukraine that there would be fire from every window and that every building will be repaired, not after the war, but right now, wherever Ukrainians control their own territory, and it is happening. It is a much more complicated topic, much more difficult to understand even for those who follow it in the media all the time. And this is a task for Polish government. But the main ingredient of social resilience is, of course, social capital. Social capital is a category that has been formed in humanities on both sides of the Atlantic, which happens rarely. Robert Putnam, in the tradition of Anglo-Saxon humanities, and Pierre Goudier and German sociologists started measuring it on our side of the pond. The humanities kind of divide into American and European, and they often remain antagonistic to each other. But social capital is a joint notion. It was a notion built to show that economic capital is not everything, that there is a human cytoplasm where things happen, and that this capital, one capital, can be converted into the other. So economic capital can be converted into social capital and vice versa. The crystallized social capital is the law. When the law works, so when I believe that when I enter into an agreement with the bank will hold up its end, and vice versa. And this is the matter of social capital, which quite literally translates later into the economy working or not, whether the loans are paid, whether the deposits are disbursed, and so on. So social capital in reality is trust. It's the thing between us, whether we trust each other, but it's also the vertical trust in the state, in the institutions. So that capital can again be built as opposition to an enemy. This is called social capital. Peace is very good at this. They build a huge chunk of civic society around them. And quite frankly speaking, this is something that our side often struggles with. When we look at the number of small NGOs, foundations, often funded illegally, but peace took care of them. If you know a peace convention with 5,000 people, hundreds of panelists, huge audience, this is the cytoplasm that later builds ideas, human resources, and so on. We may not like it, we may be illegal. It may be illegal, but it exists. On our side, we also have people dealing with culture, science, NGOs, but the state is still struggling with it. We have come out of the partitions with a lot of baggage. The partitions, Nazism, communism, the state was often the enemy for a long time. So our trust in the institutions and trust in each other in an atomized society. You know, in Russia, for example, you have more fences so that people cannot meet each other and see what the neighbor has stolen. There are 40 times more in length than the borders of Russia. That shows how atomized the society is and how they consciously reinforce this atomization. So in politics, if people don't trust each other and they don't trust the state, when you have two parties, one promises reforms, the other promises cash, people will choose cash because they don't trust that the state will implement the reforms or that they would not be rolled back by the next government. So these are the fundamental issues: the ability to cooperate, the ability to compete or refrain from competing where the competition is harmful. Those are the foundations of social economy that we are all learning. I would like to enter this category into the discussion because it is very important. Yes, I wanted to start with you so that we get a sociological perspective. Maciej, PKO-BP Foundation. Oh, if I may add, Foundation is supporting the Ukrainian projects immensely. In context of yesterday's award, it is very important. Yes, we will get back to this, but today we are going to talk about assistance and relief related to last year's flooding. I would like to focus on that to show the scale of the risks of crises. We live in a polycrisis age. Foundation has resilience objectives included, embedded in its strategic activities. So how do you work for social resilience? Well, Sławek, in continuing to what you started, we keep learning what resilience is. We keep trying to define it. So far, we have arrived at what it is not. When we know what is the antinomy of the resilience, it would be vulnerability, brittleness, vulnerability to crisis. And the antithesis of vulnerability is not hardness. This was showcased by the flood last year and the mobilization of civic society in Lower Silesia. We learn from it all the time. This relational capital that you have mentioned in times of no flood has become key in the times of flooding. I will quote my smarter colleague Kuba Wyznański here, who in post-flood report that he published together with our foundation, it was called Smart After the Cataclysm, the report talks about morphing institutions, and I would like to greet the representatives of the festival, mountain festival, that are present here. I mean, you would think that these organizations would play no role in a crisis. Venture capital calls it dual use. Here we have a true social dual use. Suddenly, it turns out that those institutions are transformed, and due to relational capital and their role in anchoring the community, they become the first point of contact for people, the first reaction institution. Lądek-Zdrój Community Center has probably served the entire Maslow pyramid, from feeding the citizens through psychological counseling, experiences, metaphysicals.
Z tego doświadczenia powodziowego.
So I believe our basic lesson from the flood experience is a better look, the need for better look of what works, looking bottom up and following the solutions that we see on site. If I may take a couple more minutes, I would like to say more about our involvement during the flood. I do believe it is an interesting case study. First of all, the response was immediate, thanks to very courageous decisions by the bank management. Quick activity based on trust. The Donors Forum were part of this network. They got us in touch with wonderful foundation, Śnieżnik Mountain Forum, and within 24 hours we got the relief in place. On the other hand, this activity was based on deep commitment of employees and clients. I'm extremely proud of it, and it makes me very happy. We have reached out to our clients of PKO Bank Polski, and we said, listen, our neighbors in the south of Poland are in a very difficult situation. Can you help them? We will match every single złoty that you pay in. After 2 weeks, we had to discontinue this action because 40,000 people handed us 6 million Polish złotys. This was a very mobilizing experience, showing us that this solidarity, the true human solidarity, continues to exist. It is also a patient engagement, patient involvement. We're always there because the commitment is still needed. We have to keep learning. Of course, you can never waste a good crisis, so we are trying to draw conclusions from it. Hence Kuba Wyznański's report, hence dialogue with the local community, hence surveys conducted by Tratwa of preparedness in Lower Silesia. Exactly. Is being prepared the same as being resilient, or are there different elements? Is it prevention activities only? On the other hand, you can't leave the disaster zone too soon. So how do you temper your involvement? Katarzyna, resilience is not just building structures, it's also information flow. How do you see it from your perspective? Well, you may remember when the first platforms, the 2.0 Internet 2.0 occurred 20 years ago, there were huge hopes for building the social capital that Sławek described so eloquently and theoretically in a very intuitive manner. We don't have to understand the theory behind it, but we can all participate in it because everybody can be a part of the movement. Emotionally, it was something very compelling. And I think each one of us has succumbed to this feeling that the people are over there. We had this feeling of FOMO, fear of missing out, that, you know, over there is mobilization, there are networks. And those portals were called social networks. And in Poland, we have suffered so much from for so long, from lack of trust, lack of community. So we have hanged a lot of hope on technology. We hope that it would glue us together, rebuild the links. I mean, we also have lots and lots of fences. Schools still segregate children. We still have classism in Poland. We have Poland A, B, C, and further on. So the internet was intended to be this forum where we meet differently. 20 years later, we see that this technology not so much let us down as it has led us astray. The idea of platforms, not media, anti-social, not social, to recoup the language. You know, I'm not here to say that real world is always better. I mean, I believe it is. I like real world, but I understand not everybody has the luxury of building social capital and acting in real world. Not everybody is part of the capital structures that Maciej talked about. So the virtual and the real world should work together. We need them both. But there is a significant problem for the civic society if we have unfortunately allowed the main forum of mobilization against the enemy to be the anti-social platforms, the places where algorithms, and we're probably going to discuss the algorithms in more detail later, their logic is not the logic of community. It's not like our class or early Facebook, my friends talk about something, I'll talk to them. No, it's television on steroids. There is a non-human editor. It's all done by software these days. It operates on big data sets in milliseconds, and it throws content at us, and it is intended to engage us, but not in the way that we would like to discuss today, in a constructive manner, you know, how can I be helpful? But usually, they want to scare me. They want me to experience fear, disbelief, and therefore lead me to click on something to see what it is. And it is nothing, because it was either empty content or disinformation. And now I find myself in a silo, because one of the effects of algorithms at work is that we stop seeing different perspectives in public debate. We end in a situation in which assessment of reaction to flood, assessment of activities exists, but it is dramatically different in different silos. It's no longer a multiplicity of topics, it's entire narratives where facts are of secondary importance. And in this situation, we have a huge problem with building social capital that would connect young people, because they are in this atomized world. Maciej, within a framework of Ashoka network, that is the old global network of social entrepreneurs. There are people much older than me. I came from the virtual world, very upset and very down with all the politics and so on. And after 2 days, I came back stronger. I met people from Śnieżnik Mountain Foundation that are 70 plus, and they have so much trust, so much energy, and so much agency that I never experienced in the virtual world. And I thought this world exists. It exists in Kłodzko-Wali, in Łódź, in Warsaw, but it does not exist in the web. So when we want to build resilience where there are ordinary people without education, without family networks in valuable social spaces, we need to recover the virtual space and make it community friendly again, because as it is now, we are being manipulated in a tribalism. As consumers, we're called eyeballs, and that's how we are counted, how many seconds our eyeballs spend on screen. And the platforms pretend that there is a community there, but they push us out of it, because in the supervision capitalism, exploiting fear, anger, and divisions is much more effective than showing the stories that we talk about today. So this is a challenge that we have to face very consciously, even if it feels difficult, because it will be rebuilding the matter that is much more difficult than rebuilding a community center.
When we talk about civil society in Ukraine, Andrzej, from the very beginning of this full-scale war in Ukraine, you were engaged in help. What was most surprising to you when we talk about the response of the Ukrainian society? Well, I was rather involved and I acted within the Polish society. My stays in Ukraine were rather short. I was just transporting some aid, some vehicles to the east of Ukraine, so I do not know much about Ukrainian society. The general picture indicates that this is a very well-organized society. I was not suspecting them of this. I wouldn't give 5 pennies for the Ukrainian civil society. It was like a murder. It was post-Soviet society. So I experienced it in Ukraine before the war. It is a beautiful literary country, like an apocalypse. It's in eastern Ukraine near Poland, and then we found out that it got organized into this machine, into this giant from the east that has human capital, weapons. And it was the fight for Kiev that Russians wanted to conquer. I have no experience with Ukrainian society. I have friends in Ukraine, Ukrainian friends. I go to Ukraine because of my friends in Ukraine. But I'm experienced in the Polish society. During the first period of the war, I was at the Polish-Ukrainian border. So what was surprising in the Polish society? Well, of course it was traffic. These were buses driven by Poles. I have a very complicated relation to my Polish nation. It's not a very straightforward relation. I know, but these are cheap, pathetic feelings, but I felt proud when at this small border crossing I saw hundreds of Poles who just arrived to help. Of course, my friends were also involved in this assistance, so from nothing they could develop fantastic institutions, for example, culture-related institutions. So Marcin Piotrowski, my friend, and his friends, very quickly they became an assistance hub. And before they were just a cultural institution, so they hired some warehouses and some 6 long vehicles were transporting every day. So Polish Jehovah Witnesses were waiting for the Ukrainian ones. Over there, Polish housewives were making a soup. Firemen with mustache were looking after Ukrainian children. So it was this huge amplitude. It was an amazing story how to alleviate this altitude between the depression, to make sure that it's stable, that it would rather follow a German pattern. So it was an incredible turn of events. So when I'm talking about society, I also mean the country. I was carrying Ukrainian females with children. The queues were huge, so we had a diplomatic channel for the most needed, for the tired ones. So we were transporting them. And the Polish border guards were conducting their controls very quickly. They were letting these people go. So the Polish country was also taken by these emotions. And what's the opinion of the sociologist? How to alleviate this? How to neutralize it? I wanted to ask about it, but I would like to add one technical issue. I cannot see the time. I think that there are some time limits, but that's great that we no longer have them. So, Sławek, please explain us about this paradox, because the studies indicate that we have a low level of trust and our civic participation is rather weak. I will not discuss the results of the latest studies concerning a bad attitude to Ukrainians who reside in Poland. Kasia will tell us more about this. But when there is a crisis, when something starts, we have this force, this will to help. So how would you explain this paradox? Our nation is the nation of crisis. We become unified, united in crisis. This is the only time when we can unite. We are good during uprisings, but when the situation becomes normal, actually we no longer engaged. So the year 2023 was this time of this nation that is very brave, and after this time, actually, again, Polish nation stopped being together, and the Ukrainian program in Ukraine is doing better than the program to help Ukraine in Poland. So when there was this pro-democratic move, we wanted to maintain it, but it was a very fragile form of the human social capital. It's always available. It can be a so-called cold social capital, focused on the common enemy. This is something that is used by Law and Justice Party. So it raises fear. We are also afraid of Russia. But of course, it's a good reason. It's a very practical reason, which is not excluded from the moral reason. Yesterday, I heard, I don't know who said it, I think that is in the interest of Poland, but I think that first of all it's in the interest of Ukraine, and it's sufficient. I do not need data on how much taxes are paid by Ukrainians who live in Poland, but maybe other people need this data. So during such difficult times, we start being united. When there is low social capital, people start working on individual basis. If there is a high social capital, people want to work together. They can change, they can boost up this energy. It becomes like a social energy. Our colleague Jędrek Marko actually was operating in a railway station in Warsaw, and he collected some Chinese individuals and got them involved in rendering care. They organized taxis, accommodation. He also involved translators, interpreters, the first contact people who were operating in this station, and I think he actually found 5,000 places of accommodations for the refugees. So to make sure that this capital is turned into an institutional capital, which is of key importance, you need to build institutions. I think that young society who are brought up on the spirits that have described by Kasia, they do not build institutions. This is the new young generation of Poles who need also to get some authority, so they write petitions, they organize protests, sometimes one movement protest. I don't know about liberté, whether in Kultura liberalna have developed this kind of movement. We are quite old, and these institutions have operated for 20 years or something. So what then we had initiatives of the engaged universities. 1 year passed and this movement is no longer available. Very often we were combining these actions. We were helping Ukrainians, and immediately we thought that we are a society that is more ethical, well organized, and we cooperate better. So we have this tradition of operating against the common enemy. But I will just give you an example. The social capital of trust can be measured very easily. You just ask people in different countries whether can you trust your neighbors, or maybe we should always conduct controls. So in the West, some 40% say yes. In Scandinavia, most responders say yes. In Poland, it's 15. In Eastern Europe, it's only 15%. So in Poland, it's a standard that populists gain power in the Eastern Europe, almost in each Eastern Europe country. Giorgia Meloni from the south of Poland now represents the populist political party. It will soon be changed, but we can see that there is so much more social capital in the West. So we can also see how society become resilient. If we write a new constitution, we can develop a constitution that will be good constitution for good democracy. But if the society do not want to stand for this, well, we can wear t-shirts with a constitution logo. And very soon we discovered that in Poland we've got this liberal democracy only in paper, in documents. And one more example from me. The first term of Trump, the second term is different because populists learned fast. I remember when he decided to stop immigrants from Islamic countries, Muslim countries. And very soon Trump had to change this position. When in Poland High Court of Justice was attacked, the government simply didn't print the act. It was over. So it showed how easy it was for the populists, how quickly the populists overcome all the barriers. Of course, we should discuss how it should be rebuilt. So to rebuild it, we are using such initiatives as this one, by meeting with people, by developing areas of trust. So in a way, that was ephemerical kind of organization of people, involving them, building new institution, developing stable bonds, learning. So it's not that Żagań needs some assistance, or Maciek's foundation can do it efficiently. So I go to Maciek, not because I know him, but because I know that he's competent, that very quickly we can keep our promises. So, but still, this is not that common in Poland. Social capital means that Andrzej Stasiuk could be the top writer, but he had to work really hard. The same for Żagań, the same for Szczepan Twardoch. They just have to work hard to be good writers. And there should be more of us it shouldn't all be based on Maciek and his foundation, PKO Bank Polski. So for this purpose, we need a kind of a structure. So what's the role of philanthropy and private sector in terms of rebuilding social resilience? Can you be proactive before the crisis? Okay, I will talk about it in a second, but I would like to reply to Sławek. In my opinion, it's a very important thesis. Young people do not build institutions. Maybe it's not a question for this panel, why they do not build the institutions. Even Kasztev gives one of the possible answers. There are simply too few of them. It's this reverse demographic pyramid that takes young people away from parliamentarian and democratic processes. They will be ready to operate on internet, in the streets. It's due to the fact that the word they know they cannot win. So this is something we should consider. But let's get back to your question, to the reflection by saying that Polish people just get united during uprisings. I don't know whether there are some national characteristics. If yes, we are the insurrection society. And this is the issue we discuss in our foundation. How to have this situation more stable, how to get rid of these peaks, not to have the position that Polish people are only moved and wise after the crisis. What to do to get ready for such crises? One thing which is a good learning from me from the Lower Silesia in 1990, Wrocław, Lower Silesia, media was saying that it's the millennium flood. Then we heard the information that we are starting the 100th anniversary of the flooding, so we need the process of deep adaptation. The climate crisis will result in significant changes. So we have to make some geopolitical alliances and other alliances. Of course, these alliances are actually no longer that strong. So this change, in my opinion, should be translated into our action. So what's the role for philanthropy? I perceive philanthropy as the capital of high risks for the social sector. Philanthropy is not to compete with the state. It's not going to replace the state. It's not this scale, but private philanthropic funding can be provided faster than the state money. They can be used for testing, for validating some thesis, and they can be used to get prepared for scaling up process. So this is something our foundation is doing. But nowadays, do we have coordination and collaboration mechanisms to facilitate cooperation among state, business, different sectors, NGOs? So what's the situation right now? I think that currently we are witnessing the birth of this act on population security, where the state all of a sudden remembered NGOs. NGOs will receive a lot of funding for this kind of involvement, so we were covered by certification. So we have to make sure that we will be able to perform some functions laid down in this national act. For many years, we've heard a lot of public and private partnerships. I think this term should be broadened. We should talk about public, private, and social partnership. This cytoplasma or this social seed, this social capital is necessary for the state. Kasia, I wanted to ask you about education.
Media education is civic education as such, so what kind of information competencies do we need? What competencies we should invest in order to become resilient to manipulation, disinformation that undermines trust in state, in institution, in ourselves? Is it even possible in a top-down movement, or should we react as a grassroots bottom-up initiative? Well, I would like to take a step back and talk about emotions, because this had sounded very strongly here. Emotion is what makes people want to be the part of the movement, and emotions make us succumb to this information. We are willing, in the name of belonging to a tribe for a moment, to feel that I am right. Yes, they do steal and they killed us first and we are right and they are wrong. You know, I know that we say that all the emotions are good and all the emotions are necessary, but you know what I'm talking about. We have this part that we are somewhat ashamed of, that we would like the conscious part of our brain to bring us out of emotion and into this community of work. But you know, we are riding an elephant. We imagine that we are controlling the elephant, really? I mean, the elephant is our emotions. They are the part of us, and the rider is the rational part that should kick in when the rush ends, and the person who was involved in a border, when they come home, they would not power hate onto the same Ukrainians that they were helping last week, and that, you know, that woman and child that he saw last week are those filthy rich people that are stealing his social benefits. You know, they should not switch banners so easily and so quickly, but it is happening. So what can we do? What can we do to make sure that the elephant does not carry us away? It sounds nice and liberal, saying, let's get educated. You know, I don't have children and I want to support the school to educate them better. This is, you know, one institution where we all meet, us, the parents and our children. If we don't have other institutions, let's fix the ones that we have. I like the idea of education reform done by Minister Nowacka. I'm sorry that the rest of the government is not helping her, because health education should be more important than Polish language, because that it involves media education, not digital. So I would like for school to teach children resilience, but how do you teach them? Via experience. Resilience is not something that you spell on the blackboard and send children back home to, you know, teach their parents. No, we need educational experience that will build what we are lacking right now, the ability of critical thinking. It's more important than telling whether something was done by AI or by a person. Technology is a nice thing, but it's a toy. I mean, we can use it for fact-checking and so on, but the important thing are the emotions. Labels. People see a label and they mock it. Now in Poland we have a big movement against one regulation, the only anti-big tech regulation, and people protest against it because they are afraid of state censorship. So how are we to win anything if the only institution we have in this game, the European Commission, solid bureaucracy? I'm not a fan of it, but if we compare the bureaucracy with the army of Russian bots that do whatever they want, they sow disinformation on a huge scale in the media that are ostensibly on Trump's side. Who is on our side? I mean, maybe nobody, but it's good to imagine that there is an independent public medium rather than Mark Zuckerberg or another oligarch. And right now in Poland we have a very active movement of people that say, do not touch the internet, down with censorship. So fact-checking is shown as censorship. So we are eating our own tail. Even before we have tested institutions such as fact-checking, we throw them away, because as a result of the tribal war is that we don't trust any institution that we did not create ourselves, and we do not create any institutions. So the school should be an educational experience, not theory. I don't want the school to teach coding. I mean, early education should be the place where children experience critical thinking. They learn to read, write, and discuss. That's when they build social capital. And they learn to realize what the algorithm is doing to them in order to resist it and not to use it better and become Instagram influencers. So, you know, we should abandon the thinking that says that teaching children digital is good and wise. We have to go back to the Montessori method. I mean, the minister said that a large part of government understood that children should be protected from screens because they have a lot of screens at home. So in the kindergarten, they have to be off-grid and they have to play in the sandbox. So we understand it for the kindergarten, but we need to extrapolate it. The second institution is technological. I will not dwell upon it because it's a long story, but just a signal for another panel. We can treat algorithms differently. When we see young people present in the network and they organize campaigns and they click petitions, sign petitions, and knowing that, we can not be angry at them for doing that. We can use that to force the big techs to design ephemeric network institutions differently. Because an algorithm that connects us or divides us is also an institution. It's a type of infrastructure that we have influence over. So we have to be a little bit smarter than those young people who do not see they are being manipulated if we want to help them to build something lasting. We should teach empathy as the element of building the resilience culture as well, because it is a bit abstract and ephemeric, this social resilience. Well, yes, but this is, you know, what happens during the break if they fight and then make up, rather than just be on their phones and learn the knowledge that they will forget in 5 minutes. Yes, you are right. And we also learn how to react to crisis, though this huge movement, this rush of Poles to help Ukrainians after the Russian invasion, it was also a response to our own fears, our own helplessness, our own search for the sense and the agency. But how do we maintain this if the crisis is permanent, if it becomes the new normal? So, Andrzej, from the perspective of almost 4 years, if not 12, if we think about the actual Russian beginning of the Russian invasion, how do we prevent the help fatigue? You are here to collect, to do the fundraising for the foundation. I don't know where the box is. Oh, it is somewhere here, but you know, there is a banker on my right, so I will attack him in a moment. Oh, I'm not sure if you can shove him into the box, but do you feel tired? Do you feel fatigue when you go fundraising? Well, I like it. I like playing the joker. I like telling jokes. There is a bit of showmanship in all that. I don't do it often. I do it during various meetings. That's why I come. Well, yes, but it's important to remember that, because we have sort of become resistant to it. Well, I do not feel fatigue. I feel need. We are tied with Ukraine a lot. We publish a lot of Ukrainian writers. We have friends in Ukraine. I have friends in Ukraine. I live near to the border. So this is everyday life. What Serhii talked about today, you can't get used to the war. It requires an effort of will, a choice. I have experienced emotions when my nation was being heroic in Budomierz on the border, but that was long ago. Now there is all quiet, and all I have is my absolute stubbornness, but there is no emotion in it, not anymore. You get emotion when you go to Ukraine, you see the ruins, you meet Ukrainian friends, and you can see how terribly the war has chewed them up. Not even because they were in the front, but, you know, psychological damage is enormous. Then I felt emotion. And here you just have to do cool work, you know. A banker comes in, you have to come and meet him. A great person from Ukraine comes in, you have to use it, you know, to make sure that the Poles all touched and moved, throw in the blue 50s into the box, into the money box. but no emotion. Listen, I'm old. 3 weeks ago I turned 65. You know, my emotions are very level. Well, yes, but I believe emotion is not a good foundation for lasting structures. Well, they are good in the beginning. It's difficult to make a sensible decision without emotions at the beginning. I mean, I'm built of emotion. My intellectual half brain is atrophied. I live on emotion, but you know, this is the reality. It's something that you simply need to do. Andrzej, you do more than you do, because when we speak about institutions, look at Czarne Publishing House. They co-create Polish culture and Poland's political culture, this social glue that we talked about. This help. I'm not even talking about ordinary people, but Czarne is a mass publishing house. Well, not so mass. Please, do you know what car I'm driving? Well, yes, but this is because you publish so many books, and not necessarily the ones that sell, but the ones that need to be published. If it were not that for 30 years people like Andrzej and Monika Schneider from Czarne published Ukrainian writer, including Żadan, I mean, this entire games would look different if it were not for Czarne Publishing House. And it is an absolute painstaking, difficult work. Doing it for 30 years with such success as Czarne is enormous. And this is institutional capital that is not based on emotions, but on systematic, hard work of many years, building the audience, building the huge infrastructure, and the mental transformation of Poles. In Poland, we often think in terms of the first threshold. Let me rephrase it, give you an example from my own experience. You know, it's not advertising. But when, together with Przemek Sadura, we wrote The Populist Society before elections, we have purposefully avoided using the word elections. We just said there are 3 stages. The first is the stage of political struggle. The second is this institutional step, restoring rule of law. And the third step is key, restoring cultural change. Polish polarization is based on social polarization that has lasted for 3 or 4 centuries. Total lack of trust between the villages and the cities, the people and the elites and the people. This is a fantastic feeding ground for all kinds of populists. And in 2 years, the government that spends twice as much on social transfers than PiS did, and who proposed 800 plus, is perceived as a miser, that PiS was giving money to the people and this government is not doing anything, is disappointing, doesn't give anything to the people. Infrastructure projects, no, they do not cut through the Vistula Peninsula, not CPK. They do not do huge things that bring insurrection emotions. And that is why they get criticized. If they put all this money into a single spectacular social transfer, that would be a much poorer investment, or one huge infrastructure project, you know, twice the CPK, even bigger. This would bring an even more significant result. So managing resilience does not bring results in Poland as good as managing insurrection. And we are now paying for it. If in 2-3 years we keep thinking in these terms, I'm talking about our side, then once again, people will be unhappy with all possible politicians who are working very hard and do a really good job, and we will give them power back, and trust me, they will not play with us in their 3rd term. Look at this government, appreciate it. I'm saying this because I see Magda Biejat here, who is a super bright star, and a round of applause for Magda Biejat, because she is a very, very hard-working politician. Well, here we could really have the curtain fall, but we have 2 minutes left. It's very undemocratic what I'm going to say, but we have time for one single question or comment. Oh, Magda, say something. You say something. Let's finally exclude men. Come on, come and be the third female panelist here. Please come on stage. We have 2 minutes for you only. Thank you very much. I do feel that what we do here is incredibly undemocratic indeed, but I do agree with many things that have been said here, and what resonates with me is this story of this perpetual insurrection that we are living in, and what to do to make this rush last longer. And I fully agree with what Kasia Szymielewicz says, that we will not bring in change until we start thinking about school differently. About school that teaches children how to build this social capital in practice. In my view, the discussion that we had about, taking away children's phones, it stopped halfway, because it's not only, this debate will come back because the act is coming back to the parliament. I do agree that cell phones should be prohibited at schools, because I do agree that during the recess, children should not sit on their phones. They should fight, they should spend time together, they should make up. But they should also learn to debate. We have to go back to the debate on democracy at school, including parents in the school's life. There was the idea to have school boards that would include both parents, self-government, students, teachers, to create a common space, but it does not exist. Children should build capital through sports, group activities everywhere. It does not exist today, but I agree with you that we should not stop at children, because young people are a minority. What about adults? What about the ones that are in the rush today, but then they forget? I do believe that our major problem is the fact that we are overworked. We are fatigued from working too much. So if we want this big top, we need to make sure that people have time. And that is why I am working towards reducing the working hours, because we need this time to stop working ourselves to death. We need to stop and do things together. Because this is true, that if something builds us, if something gives us energy, it's doing things together. It's doing things for a purpose. And finally, as a representative of the ruling coalition and as head of the parliamentary team for civic society and in non-governmental organizations, I do believe that the politicians are making a huge mistakes when they forget how enormous is the role of NGOs and of grassroots movements, unorganized movements in building resilience. Because whenever a crisis happens, be it war, be it flood, be it anything else, the first ones in place are ordinary people and NGOs. And it is normal, because before the state gets organizes a tender, makes a decision, civic society is on site. And we have to remember that every day. As we build our resilience, as we build our policies, we have to include experience and work of NGOs in this social fabric that is being built. Without that, we will not be building this capital honestly and with a long-term view. Thank you. Thank you very much. Everybody applauded us in every plenary room, but I hear that just 15 seconds as a final remark. You have kids with Frontline Foundation white boxes. All those are for Ukraine, for Kiev. Slava Ukraini.
Panie Andrzeju, jedno zdjęcie, ale to jest o tym, że Spotkaliśmy.